This is Pantheon Plus, a podcast where we go beyond tights and flights to explore other genres and movies from the past. Each month we'll have a theme. This month we are exploring the filmography of Bong Joon Ho, and today we are discussing Bong Joon Ho's quote unquote family movie, Okja. My name is Jerome Son. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through the real world. We strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5 star review so as to help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at the real world are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you can do so by following us on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. Brian, Okja came out in 2017. It was a Netflix exclusive. And one of the things that I realized is that I had not watched this movie, which is surprising because it was on Netflix. But this month has certainly given me an opportunity to explore the filmography of Bong Joon Ho, and that's been really great. And I have to say, Brian, that I walked into Okja with low expectations, given that it was kind of more of a family film. But I walked away tremendously impressed with it overall, and just very satisfied with the story elements. And you can see that a lot of the work that Bong Joon Ho had put into his previous work, a lot of that is fully realized in this movie because there is a tremendous balance of satire, of heart, of emotion, and I think the mixture of cultures I think works out extremely well. So Brian, I have to say that Parasite is still probably going to be regarded, in my opinion, as the best of Bong Joon Ho. But I have to be honest in saying this might be my second favorite of Bong Joon Ho's movies.
It's hard to argue with that, but man, this was such a fun, enjoyable ride because at the beginning of the movie, I immediately got the tone he was going for. He was going for that old school Disney feel, off and into adventure, save your pet, you know, all that great stuff about Disney movies, and of course, also shout out to Don Bluth. This is more, I would say, this is more in the style of Don Bluth because Don Bluth was more into real dramatic real life stuff like All Dogs Go to Heaven, talking about death of a pet, things like that. The first Land Before Time, before they made 13 more of them or maybe 20 more of them, I don't know, but everyone remembers the mom dying in the first Land Before Time. This kind of has that kind of feel to it and that kind of sense of adventure to it with a Feifel, with Feifel and American Tail. Same kind of feel to it, just with the little girl going off all the way from her, mountain town in Korea all the way to New York to save Okja. It's all about that journey, and he nailed it. I think he has that tone right. We talked about tone before, where sometimes he doesn't get the tone down, but he definitely got the tone down here. And if you kind of close your eyes and just kind of visualize it, as you're watching the movie, but close your eyes and hear the dialogue and hear the way it sounds, you could easily see this as like an animated movie. You mentioned Ghibli off air, and I was like, yeah, that's totally that too. And it just, I love the style and feel of this movie. I almost wish it was animated because I think he could have done more with it visually, but because of the Netflix production of it all, and the fact that it's a co-production, two languages at the same time, kind of have to meet two masters, but still, like he did a great job at balancing everything. Got a great cast, and Jake Gyllenhaal swung for the fences, man, and yeah, let's just say it was a choice, but I'm not gonna forget his performance for a long time. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
One thing I will say about Jake Gyllenhaal, he certainly makes some choices in this movie. Whether those are good choices or bad choices, you can kind of make that decision for yourself. But he is making some definite choices. As mentioned, this movie was released through Netflix. Bong Joon Ho had been severely burned by the distribution of his previous film Snowpiercer, his first film in English. It had barely scraped a run in American cinemas and was not released in the United Kingdom at all. The thought of one of his films being championed by Netflix and thereby immediately assuring a built-in audience was very appealing to him. And it's remarkable to think just 3, 4 years ago, releasing a movie on Netflix was kind of a big deal. I think partially because of the pandemic, releasing movies through Netflix just doesn't feel as unimportant. And I don't know when this transition took place. Perhaps it was Cloverfield Project being released day and date on the Super Bowl. Perhaps it's just been kind of this slow movement to streaming. But it now just feels very common that you just watch movies on your favorite streaming services. And that just does not include Netflix, but it also includes Hulu, Amazon, and to a certain extent Disney Plus. But back when this movie first premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, the audience began to boo when the Netflix's title card was released and shown in the opening credits. And then, because of a technical issue, they had to restart the movie, and the booing was even louder a second time. I don't know. I've heard some things about the Cannes audience that makes me very unimpressed with ever wanting to be a part of those audiences. But it's remarkable to think that in 2016, 2017, this movie was getting booed because of Netflix. And I think in a lot of ways, Netflix is certainly not going to save the industry, but it has certainly given a lot of filmmakers opportunities to make the movies that they want to make and not necessarily have to go to one of the traditional studios.
Yeah, Cannes audience is very pretentious. We've known that. We've heard stories about that, how they boo and cheer for certain movies and certain directors, and the way they kind of turn a blind eye to certain directors. You know, that's the way it is with the Cannes Film Festival. They have no idea sometimes what they're cheering for or against. Netflix at the time had that stigma of it's going to kill the theater business or whatever. But it does give a lot of freedom to all these filmmakers and up and coming filmmakers, and we've seen that over the last 4 years. Um, and I wouldn't say it's just at first it feels special because when you first have these movies come out, like I think Bright was a big deal, despite whoever wrote it, quote unquote. But it just feels like over time it kind of gets oversaturated because now it just feels like there's a new Netflix movie every month and maybe two or three a month, original productions, and then plus all the shows that they have. It just feels like almost too much, and I think that's kind of what's going on with Netflix when in terms of whenever there's a new movie. But because whenever there's a new movie on Amazon, they make it a big deal. You know what I mean? And then HBO Max, big deal. At Netflix, they kind of slip it under the radar. Sometimes they'll put it in like the top picks of or who's the top 10 when you log in first and you see all the trailers and stuff like that. Sometimes they don't really advertise as much and they kind of rely on that algorithm. And I think that's kind of what happens sometimes because some of these movies gotta get lost in the radar or go under the radar. You know what I mean? And there's still some movies that I wanted to check out um, last year that I just didn't have a chance to, and then it kind of slips under the radar because of the buzz dying down and that kind of thing. So I think it definitely, Netflix is definitely changing the game, but I think they want to save the industry as well or help save it. Because at this point right now, there's no theaters in my part of town. I know, a lot of different areas are treating the whole theater thing differently, but it's not nearly the box office that it was. So I think Netflix, was compromising. I mean, they did do the Irishman, and Scorsese is very critical of the whole idea of content and calling it content nowadays, and the difference between film and media and content and all that kind of thing. So I get it, but if they're willing to work with Scorsese, it shows that they're willing to have some kind of stake in the film industry or in the theater industry. So I don't think they're trying to go out and take out theaters. Obviously, it's just they're trying to do both. There's ways to make money on both. So and it kind of sucks that this kind of went under the radar too, because when it first came out, I was like, Bong Joon Ho, like the guy. Well, at the time, I didn't really watch Snowpiercer, right? So I was like, the guy that made The Host, and I was like, what? And then looking back, I didn't have no thought of it. And then if this got some really heavy Oscar buzz, I probably would have watched it, back in 2017. But it's kind of unfortunate that it happens sometimes. But I think Netflix has a responsibility to kind of market their movies better, and sometimes they don't really do that. Like I feel like even though they get huge numbers, some people still never heard of some of these movies. So it's just kind of weird. But I think they got to do some more on their marketing end.
Yeah, I think Netflix definitely needs to do a better job of marketing their movies because the reality is that especially with how big of a name Bong Joon Ho is now, like this is the kind of movie that should be promoted a lot more, and it's unfortunate that it was not at the time and still is kind of this underrated gem. Just to get into a couple of notes before we get into the things that work about this movie, the things that don't work about the movie. The Animal Liberation Front, which is a prominent aspect of this film, they are a real organization that does strive to free captured animals while economically harming big companies that profit from the abuse. But obviously, they have not yet had the success that the Animal Liberation Front, or better known as ALF, they have not had as much success here. Originally, the character that was played by Giancarlo Esposito, he replaced Bill Nighy after he dropped out. So you go from one iconic actor to the next. And Brian, I have to tell you, so I've talked a lot about Giancarlo Esposito on the another podcast that I have done for the Real World Podcasting Network, that being Real Bad, talking about to this point 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, 5 seasons of Better Call Saul. So I've certainly talked a lot about Mr. Esposito, but I have to be honest, just in thinking about this movie, that he's a little bit wasted here. It feels like he's got this very small part, and he is playing a role that I think at this point he could play in his sleep. He is playing a bad person wearing a suit, working for an evil corporation. He has done this countless times at this point. The Boys, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. So it's just unfortunate that he's almost been typecast into these sorts of roles. Not that he isn't still a great actor, but it's really unfortunate to me that he's in this movie and he doesn't get a whole lot to do.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate, but I think because he was replacing Bill Nye, that was the big difference. And it seems like this role wasn't written the way we would expect Giancarlo Esposito to take on a role. Like at this point, I think the boys spoiled us more so than yeah, I would say more so than some of the other shows. But he spoiled us there, where it's like that evil corporate boss kind of thing. And he wasn't doing the whole corporate boss thing here. He was kind of being more empathetic a little bit here, even though he was being very controlling at the same time, kind of like subconsciously controlling. But I think in this role, he did what he could. And I felt like people who watched The Boys, the producers watched this and were like, oh, this is exactly what we need for our show. So let's just have him do the same thing, but like, you know, crank up the evil scale a little bit. So I thought this was kind of like unintentional typecasting, only because we're watching it years later. You know what I mean? I think if we watched this before The Boys would make a lot more sense for us when we see him in that role. So I think this got him the role in The Boys, but you know, it's kind of the way, because we're watching it, you know, 4 years beforehand. So in terms of that, it's just kind of weird because, you know, we want more out of this role, obviously, because it's Giancarlo Esposito, but it wasn't written for him like that. So he was a replacement role. Like Bill Nye, I think, would have been far less in this role. He would have been just kind of wooden, I think, because I think with Bill Nye, you need to give him something like some kind of gimmick to work with. Like, despite what people feel about the Pirates movies, I thought he did a great job in that. And like him in like Love Actually being that kind of drunk rock star, yeah, I thought he did a great job in that. But something like this doesn't really fit him, so I'm glad they kind of replaced him. Like Giancarlo Esposito really fits that corporate role more so than Bill Nye. Bill Nye is kind of like that fun drunk uncle. You know what I mean? Like he's that kind of person, not a corporate boss. So I'm glad they kind of did that.
Certainly, let's talk about a fun mistranslation. Bong Joon Ho, of course, has a sense of humor. There is a point when Kay, who is played by Steven Yeun, is about to jump out of the truck at the beginning. According to the subtitles, his parting words to Mia are, Mia, try learning English, it opens new doors. What he actually says in Korea is, Mia, also my name is Koo Soon Boom. It's a flagrant mistranslation, but one that could be apparent to those who can speak both languages. Moreover, the mistranslation is a clever subversion of the supremacy of English. The subtitle is a command to learn English, something every Korean student has heard throughout their life. And I will just expand upon this and say that it's also something that was a big part of Chinese life as well. To actually understand what Kay is saying, you would have to know Korean. There is an added layer of comedy to the name itself, which has the whiff of the old country about it. Kusum Boom is sort of like a white man saying his name is Buford Attaway. As Yoon said in an interview, when he says Kusum Boom, it's funny to tell you if you're Korean because that's a dumb name. There's no way to translate that. That's like the comedy drop off, the chasm between countries. And the one thing I will say specifically about Steven Yeun, who we will talk about more in just a couple minutes, I think I have loved all of the choices that he has made post Walking Dead. Not just because he was in this movie, but he is also in a relatively new release, Minari, a movie that, as we are recording this, I have not seen yet, but do plan on seeing very soon. A movie I'm very excited about. So he was a prominent part of The Walking Dead for a number of years, and I'm glad that he is kind of using that to catapult himself into these kinds of roles, kind of supporting roles, kind of playing very differently than the character that he was on The Walking Dead, which obviously made him some money and made him some bank, and now I think he's doing some very good things. So, just a big fan of Stephen Yeun in general, and that funny mistranslation is a great fun fact about this movie.
Yeah, you can only do that in movies with multiple languages, right? So it's a kind of a plus that he went with both Korean and English in this movie. I almost thought he could have gotten more languages and have some more scenes around the world and stuff like that, but maybe it would have been too much. But yeah, I think Stephen Yeun is doing a great job because when he left The Walking Dead, like I stopped watching way back in like maybe 2014. So at that point he was still there, but when I heard he left, I was worried that he was going to get typecast, and I think a lot of people worried about that too because a role like The Walking Dead, it's not necessarily like the top of the show or the top bill, second bill, but still like that's he was a big part of the show, and I was worried that he was going to be typecast as like that side character that can be disposable in a movie, that kind of thing, like that buddy character. But he's taken the lead in a lot of these things. He's not necessarily a buddy character in this, but he's very he has his unique kind of character. He does some questionable things because he maybe cares way too much or maybe didn't think it through. But I love the complexity of his character in this movie, and then the idea of doing the double him being the translator adds a layer to it, and then it adds a layer to that scene, which we'll talk about later. But doing the translation, but the whole translation thing, you can do a lot with that, and I think multiple languages in a movie can be a plus, and this is a perfect example of that.
I would certainly agree with you on that, and let's get into some of the things that work. And I think again, I kind of want to highlight a lot of these performances. Before I do that, though, we have to talk about Okja as a character because if you do not believe in Okja as a character, and you do not believe in sympathizing with Okja, then this movie fundamentally is not going to work. And Okja is very much a character that is CGI, so I think it's hard to build a lot of sympathy for that character for that reason. But I think what this movie does such a great job of is the CGI looks really good, and this connects directly to the world building because we get a real sense of Mia and Okja together. The first 20 minutes of this movie, there's almost no plot. It's basically just the two of them hanging out. And there is a little bit of peril with Mia, but Brian, I love the fact that we get a sense of these two characters together and building that relationship. And Bong Joon Ho really puts us in their mindset and understands why Mia is going to end up doing what she does because Okja basically saves her life. And we see the love that develops between the two of them over the course, like I said, of those 20 minutes. So, specifically, even before getting into the individual performances, just making us care about Okja is the biggest success of this movie, both from a visual standpoint and from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, that's usually the anchor of these movies is that the creature, the pet or whatever, that's got to be like the heart of it all. And I don't know if you noticed, but the fact that there was that peril at the beginning, Okja basically had to save Miha on a cliff, and it shows you that Okja or these super pigs have like this really high intelligence because she was able to figure out to create an impromptu pulley system on a tree that was hanging nearby and swing the girl upward to make sure she lands on the cliff while she falls off the cliff, Okja, and takes this giant bump. But because of her size, she was able to take it and land on the tree. But it just showed this like really heightened sense of intelligence, and I think that was very purposeful, and that really sets the stage for like, uh, this is not just going to be an animal for consumption. This is a really highly intelligent animal, and I don't think there was intention to create an intelligent animal. They just wanted to create a big, juicy tasting animal, but they created something really smart. And I don't know if picked up on that, but I thought that was a really well done scene because A was very dramatic and like, oh my god, was this little girl gonna fall and have like this thing that's gonna cripple her throughout the whole movie or something like that. No, it just showed you how Okja is just really super intelligent, and I thought that was super smart.
I agree. I think that it worked out tremendously well. I believe pigs are some of the smartest animals. So there is clearly a relationship between Okja and a pig, even though Okja is significantly bigger you could certainly make that connection. And let's talk about Mia and the young performer by the name of An Seo Hyun. And I have to say that this movie, even though you've got some tremendous actors and performers surrounding her, you've got Tilda Swinton, Jake Gyllenhaal, you've got Byung Hee Bong in yet another Bong Joon Ho movie, you've got Paul Dano, you've got Steven Yeun, you've got all these great cast members. But if this relationship between Mia and Okja doesn't work, then the movie doesn't work. And in order for the relationship to work, you've also got to get a performance out of somebody who is an unknown at this point. And I remember just thinking how tremendously impressive she was, because I think there is a world in which even perhaps an American filmmaker would make her precocious, or there would be some girl boss or girl power element to it that would feel very forced, and that does not feel forced here. The relationship feels organic between Okja and Mia, and just the because Mia has to run through such a range of emotions throughout this movie. There's a lot of joy and happiness at times. There's a lot of fear. There's sadness. There's anger, especially in the second half of the movie. There's a lot of concern. She has to do all of this work with her face, with her eyes, with the way she talks. I can't tell you how impressed I was by her. And like I said, this is the centerpiece of the movie, and if her performance doesn't work, then the rest of the movie is not going to work. Even if Tilda Swinton and Jake Gyllenhaal are going out of their goddamn minds, which they are, and Jake Gyllenhaal is certainly making some choices in this movie, but we have to care about Mia and Okja. And in addition to Okja being kind of a risk because of the CGI, putting your movie in the hands of such a young actor is also a huge risk. But I think it paid off because An Seo Hyun is great.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about these Korean child actors, man. They're knocking it out of the park. We talked about um, what's the I'm forgetting the other movie already. The train movie, Train to Busan, and that was just tremendous. And the best actress in that movie was Little Girl. And I don't know what it is, man, but something about Korean actresses at a young age, actors at a young age. I don't know. Is it the acting schools? Maybe. Who knows? But there's something there. There's something there, and there's a lot of great talent coming out of Korea right now in terms of actors, because she did a hell of a job as well. Um, yeah, I love how she like. I don't know. I just wish. I don't know, because she does so well the facial expressions, and I mentioned how I wish this movie was animated, but I think that would kind of take away from her performance a lot. But because she did a hell of a job, because she's doing everything on point, like to get you into this movie. Like she's giving you all the drama, all the emotion. She's making you sad and cry, and then she's getting beat up and bloodied throughout this whole movie too. And she's like, it's a hell of a journey, and you're just with her, and there's nothing really negative about her. You know what I mean? There's nothing unlikable about her. So I think that's a big plus. Sometimes we'd like to watch these movies about these heroes we like to watch, but then they have all these flaws and stuff. And I really didn't see like a character flaw in her. And it's just more like she just loves this. She just loves Oakshot. Just wants her back and back in the mountain. And that's all she wants. And there's it's just pure hearted. It's a pure soul kind of thing. And I like the way that he builds this character. And it's a very pure character, and it's kind of rare to see that in movies nowadays. But again, he was going for that Disney effect, and I think he did it well. Even though there's a lot of f bombs in this movie, this feels like a Disney movie totally. Studio Ghibli, that whole fantasy creature thing, building that relationship with the main character, all that stuff. E.T. does it well. This pulls it off really, really well here. And yeah, if this doesn't work, the whole movie doesn't work. But I think he's, Bong Joon Ho's well into this now that he knows perfect casting, and I think he does very well with his casting. So I trust him whenever it comes to a lot of these casting choices. And to be on set just to work with, like, there's no actual Okja, there's probably just a giant stand-in, and for a little girl to work with that, very impressive.
So the next three actors that we're going to discuss have relatively small roles, but they are, of course, very important to the story. Of course, I'm talking about Tilda Swinton, who was in Snowpiercer, Really, we see Tilda Swinton in the opening scene of this movie, as it's the kind of the setup for what the Okja character is, and explaining a food shortage, and this corporation is going to grow all of these animals and eventually start feeding them to people. That is what Tilda Swinton, as the CEO of this giant company, she plays Lucy Miranda. She also plays her own sister, her twin sister Nancy, as well, and she's a little bit on the neurotic side and is very frustrated by a lot of the developments that occur in this movie. But she's the kind of the height of capitalism. Got a little bit of Hillary Clinton vibes from her at times. I don't know if that was intentional or unintentional, but that's certainly how it came across to me. You've also got Jake Gyllenhaal as Johnny Wilcox. He is making some choices in this movie. Again, he's all over the place. It is a very bombastic, loud, out there performance. But I think in this movie, and given the context, he is not the lead. He is not the person that we are following. You talk about the idea of this movie working better as a cartoon. Jake Gyllenhaal as Johnny Wilcox in this movie is a cartoon character. And he's not necessarily a villain directly, but he is very clearly an antagonist, and he's kind of a bully at times. He's kind of an asshole, and even though he's in a couple of scenes, he definitely will leave an impact on you if you watch this movie. And of course, Byun Hee Bong is somebody we've talked about in every movie up to this point, and of course, he is playing the grandfather of Mia. He plays Hee Bong in this movie. And again, even though it's not a big role, it is a significant one because he is seemingly trying to protect his granddaughter from what is going to happen to Okja. And there's this really emotional scene that Hebong has as Mia says that she is going to go to Seoul. She spreads her piggy bank on the floor with all these coins, and he's like trying to kick the coins away, and she's trying to grab the coins, and eventually just walks out. And a very emotionally harrowing scene. And even though Hebong does not play a big role, it's obvious why Bong Joon Ho continues to cast him because he is such a centerpiece, and he is somebody who you can fill in a role like this. You know exactly what you're going to get playing this grandfatherly role, and he does a tremendous job. So even though Swinton, Gyllenhaal, and Hebong they're playing smaller roles than you might see them in other films. I think they add a lot of flavor to this movie, and they're kind of playing three very different roles as well, as far as their relationships with Okja and Mia.
Tilda Swinton playing her own twin. That's such a Tilda Swinton move. That's such a move that she would do. I didn't even know she's playing her own twin in this movie until I started watching it. And as soon as I heard that she has a twin, I was like, please play her, please do so, please be in the movie and play your own twin and do something totally awesome. And she kind of did that at the end with a totally different personality switch and with the other twin. I thought that was a tremendous job. You know, it's that Peter Sellers thing that I like, where you can just have such a great actor that they can just play multiple characters or multiple roles or a twin or something like that. And you know, I'm not including Adam Sandler in that horrible twin movie. I will mention Jeremy Irons. He did a twin movie back in the '90s, I think, and I heard that was really good. I just haven't seen it, but Jeremy Irons playing his own twin, that kind of shit works, man. And I was just tickled with it because that's one of my what's one of my things I like in movies where you have such a great actor that they're in multiple roles. So Tilda Swinton was tremendous in this. I thought even with I think she had braces. I thought that was a tremendous little quirk. She creates all these little quirks for her characters, you know, and like the fact that she has like pink cigarettes and that her twin has green cigarettes, just shit like that. You know what I mean? Very well detailed stuff, and I thought her character was well put together. I felt like her character really, like, I don't think her character's evil. The nice twin, like Lucy, I think she really was trying to help the world. Like, honestly, she just has bad people surrounding her making bad decisions. But I think deep down, she's trying to do a good thing by creating this super pig and trying to feed the world with a bigger animal, you know, and then have the animal be more eco-friendly, less feed that it needs, less less shit, literally less shit than a normal pig would, and it's because their shit is very tiny. So I thought that was a very eco-friendly thing they put in there. But I think she did a good job with the character, and I felt like that character really is not really a villain in my eyes. So that's kind of weird. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal really is more of a villain in this movie because he's like the face of the company. He's doing the whole show, the reality show for the company, and he is just all over the place. It feels like this was a role written for Nicolas Cage. It honestly does. If this was like written to be this sort of way, and you got in the context like where he's like touching the dude's head, and that's actually in the script, then this was totally like a role written for Nicolas Cage, and then it ended up in Jake Gyllenhaal's hands. But because you've seen Jake Gyllenhaal in movies where he's just totally serious and not doing any of this wacky shit, I was blown away at how much wacky shit he was doing, and the fact that he grew out a mustache for this, and he was like, in shorts the whole time, getting drunk and torturing Okja, just like, whoa, just totally making choices. But I respect him because sometimes we need a Nicolas Cage type role in movies to kind of like throw things off and kind of make you like, whoa, what's going on here? Shake things up a bit. And he definitely shook this movie up a bit when he comes into play and just acting all ridiculous and stuff like that. But that's just kind of Bong Joon Ho's sense of humor at this point. I think at this point, after watching almost all of his movies, that's the kind of sense of humor that he has. So I'm just used to it at this point, and I'm used to like a weird, quirky character just coming out of nowhere and just kind of being part of the plot and part of the trauma of it all, and kind of integrating that. And then it gets kind of creepy with it when he's torturing poor Okja, and that was a creepy scene as well. But he did a good job with that, I think. He made some choices, but it's a Nick Cage kind of choice, and of course Bong, Byung Hee Bong, man, I think at this point he should be in The Mandalorian. I think that would be a tremendous casting because he can pull off that elder role perfectly at this point. We've seen him in 4 movies doing that, and he was tremendous here, and he's only in the beginning and the end. But still, like, I thought that scene where she breaks the piggy bank, and I purposely noticed it's a piggy bank, right, filled with money, symbolism, capitalism, saving your money, inflating the pig until it's full, and then, cashing out. A lot of symbolism there, and I thought that was a great job. And then the fact that he finally just let go and let her go. He did try, the character of the grandpa did do the right thing, I think, in theory, for the family, but he didn't anticipate that relationship building strong. So, again, it's just, typical Disney movie stuff, but just tremendously well put together and great casting and great performances.
Yeah, great job all around by those three performers, and we still got a couple performances still to address. We're going to be talking about characters J and K, and as Brian put it in the DMs, this is not a Men in Black movie, but it certainly has a little bit of that vibe given the names. Paul Dano is somebody who's been in a number of smaller independent movies. He's never really someone that has broken out and done mainstream work, and I think a lot of that is by design. I think he's just inherently more interested in a movie like this as opposed to doing a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie. But Paul Dano as Jay, I think his performance is really good. I think part of my issue with the organization ALF, the Animal Liberation Front, is that it's hard to tell just how serious Bong Joon Ho is about portraying them, and I like that in the end it's about their relationship, and I do like the fact that J and K. One of my concerns is that they were going to use Okja for their own reasons, but they really do let Okja go with Mia, so I like that ultimate choice. But I do think that part of the issue is that it is not altogether clear what the roles of these characters are, and but Paul Dano is still very good. As kind of he almost comes across a little cult like as a leader at times because he has a number of followers. Of course, Kay Stephen Yeun is one of them. You also have Lily Collins in this role as well, and then some people that I don't know. But I think Paul Dano is very good, and I think Stephen Yeun as Kay is very good. He gets a little bit more to do, and part of what makes that so fascinating and so interesting is that he is speaking both languages. Even though this is an English language speaking film and a Korean speaking film, Stephen Yeun is very much the one that is kind of bridging the gap by speaking both. And because of that, it leads to the mistranslation that we mentioned earlier. And one of the most important plot points in that Kay is the one who lies. And again, that's something that I really appreciate about this movie is that Paul Dano is not so obsessed with pushing his agenda that he is willing to sacrifice Mia or sacrifice Okja. But because of this mistranslation, it's Stephen Yeun in reality that is the one that kind of perpetrates what happens ultimately. And that is also something that I liked tremendously. And like I said, Stephen Yeun has made some great choices. Paul Dano is very good. I did like some aspect of the Animal Liberation Front angle by the end, but I definitely struggled with it at times in the movie.
Yeah, they kind of make fun of it a little bit just because there's this one character that refused to eat food, like almost completely just not eat food at all, which is totally ridiculous. But I think he was just kind of poking fun at those extremists that take it too far. And then you kind of compare it to Paul Dano's character, who's very like, this is a choice thing. We're not going to force you. I'm not going to force you to do anything. And of course, the mistranslation screws that up. But again, that's just part of the things you can do with multiple languages in a movie. You can have this kind of dramatic effects and create these interesting plot twists. You know what I mean? So with that scene, I thought it was a great job with Paul Dano and Stephen Yeun. I was super impressed with Paul Dano in this movie altogether. I haven't seen a lot of Paul Dano stuff lately. You know, I've seen A Little Miss Sunshine, of course, and then some other stuff. There Will Be Blood, of course. Some other things that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but he does make these purposeful choices not to do big budget movies. Of course, he's going to be the Riddler. He's going to be the Riddler in the next Batman movie. But I don't know, the way he carried himself in this movie was like very impressive. And you say cult leader, I don't know. It just seems like very like in control of the moment because he never almost raises his voice. At one point, he's almost yelling, but he's not. Like he starts beating up Kay just because of what Kay reveals that he lied to him, and he tells him like in a calm manner, like he's punching his face, but like I want you to leave, and we're gonna return your equipment and just leave or whatever. But he does it in such a like low tone kind of way. He doesn't like really elevate his voice. I like the way he kind of controls himself in this movie, and I'm kind of convinced that who like the producers or whatever watched this movie and were like, yeah, this is the kind of tone we need for the Riddler, and I like that kind of tone for the Riddler. And if he's gonna do this for the Riddler, I'm gonna be very impressed because even the way he like escapes the room when he's delivering that message to Mia, and then goes out of the window down the fire escape in excuse me, almost in one take, and then takes the suit off and changes the clothes. It's very that's such a trope in almost like every spy movie and a lot of these even like action movies where the main character kind of goes and does a costume change. But the way he did it with a lot of confidence and a lot of swag. And I was just thinking like, okay, if this is gonna be the Riddler, let's do this. This is gonna be really impressive. So I got really excited for Batman after watching this movie with Paul Dano. So, and the whole the whole Liberation Front or Animal Liberation Front thing, I enjoyed them as a group, and I'm glad that they kind of poke fun at themselves a little bit, or Bong Bong Hu Bong actually made fun of him a little bit, just because I felt like you need to poke fun of it a little bit. You know what I mean? Because if you take it too seriously, I don't know, it'll just kind of mess with the movie. But because of the tone and we know his sense of humor by now, it kind of fit his style of movie.
I would agree. It certainly fit ultimately because he does like to mix and match some genres. He is also just tremendously successful at being able to balance. I think the balance has gotten better and better. I think it did not necessarily work in Barking Dogs Never Bite because the moment that you kill a dog, you're changing the entire tone of your project, and so that's something that I think is worth noting. The other thing that I want to talk about is the ending of this movie. So we do get the separation between Mia and Okja, and this corporation is going to kill Okja and use him to feed all these people. And there's a lot of chasing that goes on, and Mia is able to reunite with Okja briefly. But eventually, there's kind of a recapturing that happens, and this kind of staged reunion that is going to take place. And I think the movie is working very well. But then, when you get to the end of this movie, it gets a little bit dark. I don't think it gets nearly as dark as Mother or even Barking Dogs Never Bite, but there is a sequence of events where they basically show a number of these super pigs that get murdered and slaughtered, not unlike cows and pigs and chickens do in some of these factories from around the world. But to see this animal that looks like Okja just have this thing put to its head and then killed, and then to know that so many of them are going to be slaughtered, and we see them being led to the slaughter. I mean, it's a pretty dark moment, and there is clearly an anti-meat message in this movie, and I wish I could be the type of person that could go vegetarian and vegan because those are very good choices from a health standpoint. But man, This movie really makes you think at the end just about the ramifications of what is happening to all of these animals and just the role that capitalism plays in our food distribution. And I think even to an extent the lack of knowledge that we all have about where our food comes from. And I think that, there is more of an effort of saying food to table or farm to table, but what does that actually mean, and how are these companies getting the meat? And it certainly gives you a lot to think about. And those moments of seeing those super pigs being led to slaughter, and the fact that the only way that Mia could save the day, the only way that she could save this animal, not to not to persuade them with decency or humanity, but good old fashioned capitalism, buying her way out of the situation by literally giving them a golden pig. You mentioned the pig, kind of the pig ambiance of this movie earlier, and I think it really pays off tremendously by having her get Okja, save Okja's life by using a golden pig. I don't, it's not subtle, but I think in this case it totally works.
Yeah, I love little things like that, man. Things come full circle with little details. That's just great filmmaking. The ending is dark, but there is like a I don't know if he's totally anti meat in this movie. Like I feel like he does present good cases. Like I mentioned, I think Lucy Miranda honestly had good intentions. Like she's trying to like when she found out all the bad stuff that happened to Miha when she tried to break Okja out, she tried to like, oh my god, this can't happen. We need to treat her better, blah blah blah. But then it's the people around her that make the shitty decisions and make the evil greedy decisions. Like Giancarlo Esposito. That's what he's there for. So I think there is like some commentary there where like we assume all these corporations are evil and they're all out to get us and stuff, but there are some people on top that are legit trying to do good things. It's just other people coming into conflict with that, and it kind of screws things up. And that we see that all the time in government, big corporations. One hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, kind of situation. So I think that's a good reflection of that, and I think that was fair, and like he did that pretty balanced, I think, because like even though it's a dark ending and they're walking away, it does feel like, well, these new animals, like this could really change things. Like if based on the science and what we know about these Okja animals, these super pigs, like it really could change things. So, um, and people don't want to see people don't want to see animals get slaughtered and don't want to put two and two together in their head that the fact that the burger they're eating is coming from a slaughterhouse like at some point, you know what I mean? So there's that connection that we as a society just block out. So I've kind of come to terms with that. I don't know if you've come to terms with that because we're both meat eaters, uh, and I don't like shame myself for it. You know what I mean? But coming out of the end of this movie, I was like, I don't really feel shameful. You know what I mean? I feel bad for, you know, the way that some of these corporations are kind of run by some of these people that don't really know how to run it well or ethical. People turn a blind eye to these things. So there's a lot of things that coming out of this movie that's like you can easily say this is anti-meat or whatever, but I just feel like he kind of put both arguments on the table, and I really feel like that's why you had twins. Lucy Miranda is kind of like the positive, like we can do better as a society, but we can also be a corporation kind of thing. And her evil sister is kind of like opposite of that. And she was the one that wanted to kill Okja. Lucy did not want to kill Okja. That was never the plan. She just decided, let's just kill all of them and just make some meat and let's go from there. And that's what really, accelerated the ending, where it got really super dramatic because there was no intent to kill Okja up until the last 20 minutes of the movie. So that's kind of really creates that third act. So I thought he did a good job. And if you look at the writers, it was him and someone else, but like again, like he had control over the script. So I felt like he presented both arguments evenly.
That is certainly true. I just have a couple things that did not totally work for me. As I mentioned, Giancarlo Esposito, who I love, just didn't work as well as I would have liked for Frank Dawson, and it's unfortunate. I think the aspect of this movie going to Netflix, I think it might have hurt the buzz a little bit. to the extent that I don't think a lot of people, as enough people, have seen this movie, and I dig it's still on Netflix, so I think people should definitely go check it out. And also the role of Alf, not necessarily whether it's clear that they are antagonists or protagonists. And I think you could have made Alf better by having the actual Alf in this role, because I feel like Alf and Okja might be spiritual companions.
Listen, Bong Joon Ho is a weird guy, and you know that we as Americans are thinking of Alf, the creature, the alien from the comedy show in the '80s, right? He knows we're thinking that, so why else put that acronym in there? It's a little shit like that that he's just kind of playing with us, you know. So I think that's an intentional joke within itself. But yeah, for me personally, the music is what really doesn't work in this movie. Like, there's not anything memorable about this score, and I don't know what it is. I think that kind of was the issue with Mother for me as well. Like, the score wasn't as memorable, but for some reason, the host, great fucking score that I just remember because of the drums and then maybe it's the Jaws effect. I don't know, but the music was not working for me in this movie. Other than that, he didn't really get to play with small sets. That's the one thing. When he goes big budget, he doesn't really get to play with the small sets. Maybe a little bit at the beginning, but you know, everything was just kind of like big and elevated like that, and the chase sequences and stuff like that. So I thought that was that was interesting, but I just wanted more from Bong Joon Ho in terms of that. So uh, the music I mentioned, and I think the editing he did a great job as well. But um, again, he's trying to do these 2 hour movies. I wanted more Jake Gyllenhaal, and that might be the only thing. And we never actually found out what happens to Jake Gyllenhaal's character and the consequences of it all. He just gets knocked out on stage, and we really didn't get to see like truly his motivations. And I wanted to see the twins' dad because they talk about him a lot as this evil dude, and it was just building up to a flashback that never happened.
Yeah, I can certainly hear your point about the music. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I just think it's very unmemorable, and it's unfortunate because I think it's something that really hasn't worked in a lot of Bong Joon Ho movies. I think it did much better in Parasite, but yeah, I would certainly agree with you on that. So for MVP, I'm going for Bong Joon Ho once again, just because this is the vision of a singular artist, and this is also the kind of movie that you can't. This can't be a first movie because he has to go through a process, and I think you see that process visualized over the course of the 4 movies that we've been watching. I mean, in The Host, the monster is this great evil, and even though Okja is not necessarily a monster, here Okja is portrayed as kind of a protagonist, and you see kind of the evolution of capitalism and just how bad the United States is. I think that's also been something that's not so subtle about some of his movies. And Bong Joon Ho, just as an artist, I really appreciate what he is able to do. I love the fact that he directs his movies, but I also love the fact that he always has a co-writer, which is something that I think a lot of directors, quite frankly, need. Like, Christopher Nolan should not be writing scripts by himself at this point because he is such a good director, but man, some of his scripts lately have just been really bad. So I am very, very glad that he is able to co-write his movies and have another voice. I think that's important. And of course, Mia on Seo Hyun is the best performance. Again, there is no possible way, in my view, that this movie works unless hers works, and she did a very, very good job.
Yeah, definitely MVP Bong Joon Ho. I can only imagine what goes through his head because like he does the Hitchcock thing where he knows exactly what to shoot when he storyboards. It's like he follows the storyboards exactly. Whereas, you know, Hitchcock didn't even use storyboards. I think he just shot in his head. He just knew exactly what to shoot. But again, I think Bong Joon Ho kind of shows his genius in what to shoot in this movie because like some of those animal sequences and like the fact that he filmed inside that small mall and the animal looks even bigger. Okja looks so much bigger in a small mall. Like little details like that really elevate the visual look of the movie. So he knew what he was doing. And best performance, I agree. An Se-hyun as Miha. I want to say a second place for me, close runner up would have been Paul Dano. And I don't know if it's just not I haven't seen enough Paul Dano movies lately, but it just felt like whoa. I did not expect that kind of confidence and coolness on screen and that swagger that he had. Did not expect that. But definitely Miha was just like totally the anchor of this movie from beginning to the end. And I guess we got to maybe third place credit to Jake Gyllenhaal for making some choices as Johnny Wilcox, because man, he's definitely the most memorable person in this movie. But yeah, it was just so wacky, but a good kind of wacky. Maybe we need that sometimes in movies.
I definitely think we need to have that in more movies. Just some random wackiness. I would probably put Jake Gyllenhaal number two and Tilda Swinton three and Paul Dano four. And it's not necessarily that I think any of the performances are bad, but I think there's something just about what Gyllenhaal does that really sticks with me, and the Paul Dano character just did not connect with me as well. But Paul Dano is still very good, and I had forgotten that he was going to be the Riddler in the upcoming Batman movie, and I'm very excited to see, just because you have such a wide variety of actors that are going to be in that movie, that are, a lot of them are known for kind of their indie work, and it's going to be really interesting to see just how that movie is rendered, just as it was to watch Okja. And with that, Brian, we are officially done. We are done with Bong Joon Ho month. We may come back and do Memories of a Murder at some point, but for right now, we are going to be returning to the superhero world, Brian, in the month of March. We are going to be doing what is known as, this is your title, so I'll let you tell us about it.
Okay, so when you brought up the fact that we got some more superhero movies from last year to review and see if they go in the Pantheon or not, I said, yeah, let's do it for a month. So, of course, in the comic book tradition, we're going to call it Superhero Pantheon Limited Edition. So, we're going to do four movies. Some of them are kind of, oh my God, we're going to revisit some that are just put some bad memories in my head, because one of them is going to be New Mutants, but we'll talk about that later on. But we're going to start it off pretty good, because I think this one came out a year ago. A lot of people liked it. It left an impression on me where I just wanted more from it. So we'll talk about that next week. But it's Birds of Prey and the Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. And so it's been a crazy year, and this came out right before the pandemic hit. And people would argue, or people think that they can argue, that it would affected the box office, but I don't really think it did. I think there was just kind of like this bad marketing kind of thing, and it was targeted to the wrong people. We'll get into that next week, but Birds of Prey is gonna be a fun start, but then it's gonna go a little downhill from there. But then we're gonna pick it up again.
So yes, I think that is a discussion that we will have next week about, how much was affected by the pandemic. But basically, this was the last movie to go into theaters before the pandemic really took hold in the United States. What we are also going to be discussing in the month of March is New Mutants. Yes, that is a movie that existed. It also returned to theaters, or returned everyone to theaters, or like the six people that saw it in theaters. So we are actually going to discuss New Mutants, Brian. That is a real movie that happened. We are going to talk about it in 2 weeks.
I know, and that's unfortunate. I saw it at a drive-in, but we'll talk about it because it was unfortunately the night that Chadwick Boseman died. So that just really leaves a sour taste in my mouth, and the fact that it was a really shitty movie the first time round just doesn't really help either. So
Yes, and you'll be reliving that shittiness all over again when we talk in 2 weeks. In addition to that, we are going to be reviewing Netflix's The Old Guard. This is a movie that I've seen that Brian has not. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation, because Brian's a little bit cool on the movie, and I'm very much looking forward to him watching it and having a good conversation. And then we are going to end the month by discussing, what are we going to be discussing? We will be talking about WandaVision, the limited series that has been airing on Disney Plus, and we are going to talk about, on that same episode, the Stan Lee biography that has recently come out, Brian. So you have reading homework to do for the first time on this podcast.
yeah, I'm excited, and that kind of coincides with my collection going on right now because I don't know, for some reason at the beginning of the year I just started collecting all these Stan Lee pops, and I got like four of them right now, and I got two I got my eye on, and one probably I should not spend $300 on, and I probably won't do that. But Stan Lee's the man, and I'm glad we're gonna dive into his story a little bit and read this new book. And yeah, and if you got some Stan Lee pops out there, let me know. Might be interested. There you go.
Absolutely. So for Brian, again, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you next week for Superhero Pantheon Limited Edition.
For the record, people, I did not cook a steak while watching Okja. I ate Panda Express.